This is the Dreamers Podcast, where dreamers share their stories to inspire you. Now, join host Joe Pardo as he interviews a dreamer who's living their dreams.
Hey dreamers, I'm Joe Pardo, and today I am talking with Steve Swanson, who is making his dreams come true by finding himself in podcasting, and now is coming back to the Muppet Cast. Glad to have you on the show, Steve.
Joe, hey, how's it going, man?
Oh, it's going amazing. We just like 2 months ago celebrated 1 year of Dreamers Podcast. We raised over $600 for charity.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Awesome. Congratulations, man. That's great.
Thank you. It was an amazing experience, and I can't wait to do my next live show where we'll do even more crazy stuff.
Really? So you're into pain, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't really painful, but
well, that's good.
It was a good time all the same.
That's good. Congrats, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. Steve, why don't you get started by giving some background about yourself, explaining what the Muppet Cast is?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. Okay, the Muppet Cast is a crazy idea I had about 8 years ago. I don't know why I ever started it, but it's been a lot of fun. It's actually been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done with my life. So I've been a lifelong Muppet fan, much like, many of us, probably you listening. Yes, you right there.
That's me.
Yes. I was always a big Muppets fan from my first memories. I mean, I remember growing up with Sesame Street and Bert and Ernie. Those are the two characters who I think my first Muppet memories are of those two characters. And then, of course, Cookie Monster. And I watched The Muppet Show with my family growing up. We all got around, gathered around the TV. I think it was a Tuesday night, or maybe it was a Sunday. I don't know. I was really, really young back then. But we all watched The Muppet Show, and I, watched Fraggle Rock growing up. And the Muppets were always just a part of my life and who I was. For various reasons, I loved the characters. I liked the comedy. I really loved the music. I was always a music kid, too, and we'll get into that later on, I think, probably as well. But so... The whole podcasting thing came about right around 2005 when my then wife and I went on our honeymoon to Walt Disney World in July 2005 because we didn't know that's the worst possible time to go to Walt Disney World in the middle of July. But there we were. And we had a great time. I mean, you're going to have a great time at Disney no matter when you go, I think. We certainly did. And we had not been to Walt Disney World ever as adults. I had been once as a very, very young child, and I think she had too. But, this is the first time where, we would actually have memories of the place coming home. And boy, we had great memories. Disney it makes an impression on you. It really does. And so we got home and we're out of the Disney bubble and back to life and kind of coming down off of that Disney high. And of course, the internet was a thing, a big thing, and podcasting was very new, though. So I'm looking around at different, seeing if there's any Disney fan forums. There's got to be something, right? Other people besides us can't instantly just be this crazy about Disney. There's got to be a lot of crazy Disney people out there. And I found a couple websites, and I found a website called Inside the Magic. What's that? Okay, let's see. Oh, it's a podcast. Hey, I'm listening to a couple podcasts already. In fact, one of the podcasts I was listening to, and you may remember this name, Joe, was a guy named Adam Curry. And he did a daily podcast called The Daily Source Code. He's one of these really, really, really rich guys that just had nothing else to do, apparently, than make a podcast. And he is kind of the modern father of podcasting. So I was a big fan of his show, so I knew what podcasts were. I knew that there was this content out there, but iTunes didn't really have podcasts yet. So I would download shows like The Daily Source Code or Inside the Magic and Mouse Guest and a couple other shows, and I would actually burn them to CD and listen to them in my car. And then I think it was around 2007, iTunes formally recognized podcasts and the market exploded with shows. And there were a lot more Disney shows in particular, and I was really getting into this. And the way I actually got into doing my own podcast was really, really weird. I am also, well, I live in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio, and there's a radio show that I listen to called Bob and Tom. They're out of Indianapolis, but they're syndicated nationwide. Well, around 2006, they were doing a sweepstakes, as they did every year, to take a bunch of winners to the Bahamas for the Super Bowl. All right, they'd rent a plane, they'd rent a big portion of the beach, and they threw a huge party and bring some celebrity guests, and they brought, around 100 winners or so for the sweepstakes every year. So 2006, it's December, and I thought, okay, why not? And just one morning before I left for work, I typed my name and address into the web form and hit send. And then a couple days later, I get a phone call. And it was early in the morning, and I just send it to voicemail. And, it's just one of those early morning phone calls. And then I picked it up once I got up and was getting around, and it said, "Hi, Steve. This is Dean Metcalf. I'm the producer of the Bob and Tom Show. And, well, you're one of the winners for the Super Bowl in the Bahamas sweepstakes. So if you call the show, maybe we can get you on the air with the guys before they get off the air. But you are a winner, and you're going to the Bahamas with us." Oh, okay, that's great. And long story short, the great thing about the Bahamas was, of course, the Super Bowl party. It was great, but it was one of those moments, and I've gotten this several times now in podcasting, but this was like one of the first big moments for this in life, was I got to meet one of my heroes. And sometimes that's a risky thing because they're not always the people you think they are. But in this case, the man's name was Todd Snyder. And Todd Snyder is a singer-songwriter type of personality. He's very much like a John Prine kind of countrified kind of chap. And I learned how to play guitar. I taught myself how to play guitar in high school by listening to his records. And here he's sitting at the table right next to me now at the game in the Bahamas. And so I'm really excited. I need to find an excuse, a way to get over there, to shake his hand, to talk to him for a couple of minutes, because I'm never going to have this opportunity again. So halftime comes, and we're all kind of up and mingling around, and I get to meet Todd Snyder, and I tell him that, hey, I love your music. Your song "All Right Guy" in particular is one of my absolute favorites. I learned how to play guitar by listening to your stuff. In fact, that was one of the first songs I ever learned how to play, man, was your song "All Right Guy." And he was very, flattered and very gracious. And, oh, man, he's kind of a hippie guy. "Oh, dude, that's great. Man, that's awesome. Thank you. Thanks, man." And he said, "Hey, I'm going to be on the radio show, Bob and Tom, tomorrow, because they're doing a show here in the beach. I'm going to be on the show tomorrow. I brought my guitar. You want to maybe play guitar and I'll sing the song? Do you still remember how it goes?" Yeah, definitely. We can do that. I mean, I was like, who gets that kind of opportunity, This guy just kind of off the cuff. I'm sure if he had more time to think about it, he might not have made that offer, because that's really risky. But he did make the offer. I did accept, and I got to play guitar on a nationally syndicated radio show with my hero as he sang the song and I played it. And that's when the bug bit me officially, where I was on the radio, not just in front of a microphone doing something, because that was really only for a few minutes doing the song, but I got to see how this production comes together. And I got to see sort of the intricacies of, okay, here's how radio works. It's all these tech people and all these different roles that come together to make a show that just sounds like it happens. Okay, well, I've done quite a lot of music in my life and recorded a few albums and whatnot. And so I'm familiar with multi-tracking, that concept in recording, and I've already done that before. And a podcast is just a multi-track production. Well, I can do that already. So that was great. And then when we got home from that trip, I had been listening to plenty of Disney podcasts at that point, and I was really chomping at the bit to get into that space, because the great thing about podcasting is there's no barrier to entry. You don't have to wait to be picked anymore in this environment. But I didn't want to just do a Disney show, because I didn't want to be just another voice in the crowd. So I picked it. Well, the first subject I picked was just a music podcast. And of course, there were another couple thousand music podcasts out there. So nobody listened to that. And that only got about 6 episodes in. And then I had about, I'm sure the dozen listeners that I had at that point were very disappointed when I stopped podcasting for that particular show. But then I got the idea to do a Muppet podcast. And there's a great web community out there called Muppet Central. It's still out there, muppetcentral.com. Their forums are some of the best forums and still some of the best fan forums out there. There's actual Muppet performers on Muppet Central. It's kind of cool. And I floated the idea out there. I said, hey, guys, I'm kind of thinking about doing this, to do an actual Muppet podcast. But if I did it, would anybody here listen? And of course, the response was pretty overwhelming. And then in April 11th, 2007 was episode 1 of the show. And, it's now been 8 years. There's been a little bit of time that I've taken away here and there, but the show is back. I'm here. I don't see myself going anywhere in the foreseeable future. And I'm loving the ride again.
Well, it's funny how it never ends, right?
Oh, it really never does. It's like The Godfather. Just when you think you're out, not so fast. No. And the great thing about that is it wasn't just me saying, oh, well, I'm done podcasting. Nope, no, I'm not done. No. I'm coming back. Nope, I'm gone again. It is kind of an ebb and flow, but it's the listeners. It's the listeners who continue to reach out to me when I was away from podcasting. Because, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't always a happy time when I was away from podcasting. Sometimes there were reasons that I had stepped away. And it was that constant listener support. I don't use the word fan very much at all. I use the word listener support because these are your friends. These are the people who love what you do, and they love it so much that they make you a part of their lives. They make you a friend, and you become a friend, and then they become your friend. And that's how these communities get started. And so, yeah, it was really in a big way, it was the listeners who, through their encouragement, I kind of helped. They kind of helped make that decision for me to say, yeah, maybe it is time to come back. And I'll tell you what, it's been great so far.
I love the term listener as opposed to fan, because fan seems to make people feel egotistical, right?
Yeah, I really try to shy away from the egotistical stuff. And the way that it works for me in my head is, you know what? Nobody's listening to the Muppet Cast because they're such a fan of Steve Swanson. We are all together fans of Jim Henson and the Muppets and the things that Jim created. We're all Jim fans. And that's how it has to work for me. Otherwise, because I don't want to think about it that way, that otherwise that's a lot of responsibility to my fans. No, come on, that's silly. This is fun. This is fun. This is cool. And we're all sitting around the campfire here talking about Muppets. That's what I really love about it.
Well, I mean, I got a lot of love for the Muppets myself, so I'm glad to have you on the show, and I'm glad that you're getting back to it
Yes.
at the perfect time where the Muppets seem to finally become relevant again.
How about that? Yeah, isn't it interesting that things just happen to work out where, the Muppet Cast comes back, and then all of a sudden there's an announcement that there's a new TV show coming up, and already there's a new round of Muppet things on YouTube. The Muppets have done a lot of great things on YouTube in the past, and now they're doing even more great videos. And what's cool is I like, the Muppets evolve over the years, and that's one of the good things, but there are also timeless qualities to the Muppets as a whole and to the various characters. I mean, you can look at a character like Gonzo, who's really gone through a big, big evolution. Gonzo has almost kind of grown up over the past, however many decades it is now. I want to say it's more than 40 years.
Well, Kermit's 60 now.
Kermit's 60, for goodness sake. Gonzo is at least 50, at least 45. But anyways, he's not a spring chicken. He's in love with a spring chicken, but he's not a spring chicken. But Gonzo, if you go back and watch some of the early Muppet Show stuff, his voice is a much higher pitch. He's a little bit more spry, a little more spunky. And as he's grown up, when Jim passed away, Gonzo and Rizzo had to kind of step up and maybe grow up a little bit and be the leader. And so there's that. And now Dave Goelz is one of the only original Muppeteers left. Dave Goelz being the performer of Gonzo among many, many other characters. But so because Dave is, an older performer now, Gonzo is an older character. And these Muppet characters are reflections of their performers. And so it really makes perfect sense.
So, Steve, when you were first getting started, you all right, so you had the idea for the podcast, you had the support of a community that still exists today. What were the first steps that you took? Because in 2007, podcasting wasn't as easy as just going to your local store and buying a USB mic for $50 and plugging it in and recording with free software.
Oh, sure. Let's talk about that. Well, okay. So how do I want to start this?
Though I think Audacity existed in 2007, but even still.
Yeah, but I didn't use Audacity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used the software that I've been recording with for years already with music stuff. I'm a big fan of the Sony tool set. So I use tools like SoundForge and Acid Pro, and you can use Audacity now to do 90% of that stuff. And in fact, I teach a podcasting class once a month here in Columbus where we primarily use Audacity because, the price point's nice. But way back in April of 2007, so I was on, my first podcast mic. I've gone through 3 now. And that one was an old stage mic that I probably still have somewhere around here. But it's an old Shure 57. It's a handheld stage microphone that I had a cord that converted it into, an in that you could plug into a sound card. So I had a very unconventional microphone set up. And it was something I just sat there at my desk and held it in my hand. I didn't even have a mic stand, Joe. This was like really low budget. It was kind of silly, really, to watch me do it. But I wrote out on Notepad a few ideas and thought, how am I even going to start this show? And I wound up starting episode 1 with something that kind of tied my love for the Muppets and Disney together. I did my first episode 1 was a pretty in-depth review episode of a TV special called The Muppets at Walt Disney World. And it's still out there. You can watch it on YouTube. And in fact, go watch it after this. Listen to the rest of this show first, but then go watch The Muppets at Walt Disney World. It's really great. You'll love it.
It's really not accurate, though.
Yeah, it's so not accurate, but that's okay. But I had to teach myself how to do everything in podcasting because you're right. It was brand new. I had no idea how I was going to make any of this stuff work. I had iTunes. It had been around for several years already. I had an iPhone. I knew how to use all this stuff, but I didn't know how to produce anything that would actually wind up in iTunes with my name on it. How does that happen? WordPress was very new at the time, but as I Googled around and did a little bit of preliminary research, it seemed like a lot of people who were starting up these homegrown podcasts were using WordPress as a blog. And boy, that was a new word back then too, a blog. And okay, you can make a blog post basically represent your podcast episode. That blog post can hold your MP3 file. Okay, well, I can do that. So I figured out how to download WordPress onto my computer and how to set up a web host environment, how to get a web host account. I'm also on my 3rd web host account at this point, but I've been with the 3rd one for a very, very, very long time. And they've always done great. But the first one was not very good, but it was the first one that I picked. So I set up my web hosting account. I installed WordPress. I did a ton of reading that first 6 months on how to design web pages because I had a little bit of experience, but not much. Everything with the Muppet Cast, and it still is very learn as you go. The nice thing about the Muppet Cast today, rather than as it was in 2007, is, and I think you've probably learned this, seen this too in your own, the things that you do as well, is it's not that you get so much better at what you do, it's you learn how to learn more efficiently. And that's certainly been true for me. And so, but at the beginning of the process, those efficiencies were not there. And the first episode, it was probably between 45 minutes and an hour, and it took 18 hours to edit. It was just that much work. And I thought, and I kind of had some second thoughts at that point, like, oh, do I want to do this every week? Well, let's see. Let's give it a shot. I did 6 episodes of that old music show. I've got 6 episodes of this in me, and then we'll step back and reevaluate. And that's kind of a podcasting pro tip, observation, whatever you want to call it. But something that I've seen with a lot of shows is if you can get to episode 7, then you're probably okay. But if you don't make it to if it takes you a long time to get to episode 7, you're probably not going to stick with this. But I did. I stuck with it. And so I figured out how to set up a website. I figured out how to upload this MP3 file that I had made for episode 1, to upload that to an FTP account in my web host. Figured out, oh, this is something called a plugin for WordPress called Blueberry that I apparently need, because this will help me to put what I created into iTunes. And I'm pretty sure I did it wrong the first time, but I got that there. I was okay with Photoshop, so I kind of ginned up a logo that looked a little bit like what I thought the Muppet Cast, the Muppet Show logo, how that looked. It wasn't very good, and I think you can actually, there's a website called archive.org that you can go back and look at old versions of muppetcast.com, and oh boy, those are rough. But you know, when you're starting out, the great thing is it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to do it. And boy, that's something that Jim taught me. The more I learned about him, and really Walt Disney at the same time, because both men are people I consider to be my heroes. And that's a real big life lesson, is don't wait for everything to be perfect, because it will never be perfect. Just start doing it. And that's kind of what I did with the Muppet Cast. I just kind of kept pushing forward. And if I hit a little speed bump, well, I'll learn how to deal with it. I'll learn how to solve that problem and move forward. I never had a co-host. It's always just kind of been me in this production. But you know, luckily I had other podcast friends that I made in the community to kind of help give me some tips and things like that. I bought a better mic as time went on, but a lot of the original recipe for the Muppet Cast has not changed. I've got a web host. It runs on WordPress. I still use the Blueberry software to do all the distribution. I've changed my microphone. I have a Zoom H2 microphone now that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. It's been a great microphone. I've taken it everywhere and done most of what you hear with the Muppet Cast within the last several years, at least, has been with this microphone. Let's see what else. Yeah, I've taught myself publicity. I learned how to talk to PR people and to some of the creative director of Disney's Muppet Studio. I learned how to talk to that person and not sound like, "Hi, I'm a big Muppet fan. I was wondering if we could do an interview." You know, these are all skills that we as podcasters sometimes have to master. And you know, it's funny, Joe, because as I look back on how I got started, I mean, here I am, but I have no idea how I did all that stuff. You know, I mean, it happened, obviously. But some of these things that are great, and I consider the Muppet Cast to be a great achievement in my life. So looking at great achievements in life are things that I'm really proud of, you know, and you go, wow, how did I do that? But I did it. And that teaches me more than anything. It just teaches confidence. These are all skills that I needed for podcasting. Some of them translate to life away from podcasting, but I teach music as well. And I kind of see this in the students that I teach more than music and more than the podcasting that I teach with consulting and all that. What I'm teaching people is self-confidence. I'm teaching them, you can do this. And that's been one of the really cool things about doing the show.
I'm curious though, as to when you were going through all these transformations of turning yourself into a podcaster and taking skills that you knew and turning it into a thing that gained listenership and took you to places where you didn't have to sound like a Muppet talking to people who created the Muppets or worked with the Muppets. How did your family go along with this ride?
That's actually a good question. So I am, and you may be shocked to learn this, I am the biggest Muppet fan in my circle of friends. And so when I told everyone that, hey guys, this is amazing, I'm going to start a podcast. Well, some people actually knew what a podcast was. Others didn't. And I basically explained it as, it's like a radio show, except instead of coming over the radio, it comes over the internet. And then they said, oh, okay, what's the internet? No, they didn't say that. But they did say, how would I listen to it? Because if it comes over the internet, well, my car doesn't have the internet like they do today. But how would I even do this? So I did a little bit of explaining to people like, oh, here's how you get into iTunes. Because obviously we all own iPhones. There's no other kind of smartphone except an iPhone. So plug your iPhone into iTunes. Here's how to search for me. Yep, you can look up my name in iTunes. Isn't that cool? I think so. And you can subscribe to my show and download it, and then you'll get it every week. At the outset of episode 1, as I'm explaining this to everyone. And then I do the episode 1, and my friends and family, who were all very supportive, they all loved the fact that I was doing this. They said, oh, that was a great podcast. That was cool. So that's, you think are you going to do another one, or what's next for you? Well, no, it's a weekly show, guys. I'm going to do more. It's not, a podcast isn't just one big show and then you're done. But then again, maybe some people thought like, oh, it's like a movie. You make a movie and then you're done making that movie and you move on. So podcasting was kind of not an uphill battle, but it was an uphill journey, I'll say, and a rewarding one. I would definitely add on to that. But it is an uphill journey at the beginning, not only learning how to do what you want to do with a show, not only the process of finding your voice as a podcaster, which I feel like I'm still doing. I can't go back and listen to those early shows. Like episode 1, oh, kill me. I sound like an idiot. I can't do it. And I tell people, you can go back and listen to episode 1 if you want. I just told someone this less than a month ago. You can go back and listen to those early shows, but I'm not going to listen to them with you. I can't, I hear all the kinks in the hose, and just like many of us are our own worst critic. And of course, that's something I'm working on, is not being that. There are other people who I'm sure could be a far better critic of me than I could be. But I learned you learn how to find your voice. What was I even talking about, Joe?
Well, you were talking about how much of an uphill battle it was, and how it took 8 years for Apple to take that podcast app that they had finally created, and then moved it as a default app on the phone. And for people to say, what the heck's this thing on my phone? I don't know what that is. Because before that, it was like, hey, you got to sync your phone. And they were like, I don't sync my phone, but like never. Oh, I lost my phone. Oh, where'd all my data go? Well, did you back it up? What's a backup? I don't know.
Oh gosh, I'm still fighting that battle. Yeah,
and even with them backing up online to the over the air, it's still a battle to get people to back up.
Well, it is. It's also a battle to get people to listen to your podcast.
Oh yeah, that hasn't changed yet either.
The whole publicity thing. Now that was challenging. I feel like I was a little bit lucky there because I had the support of the fan community. Again, going back to Muppet Central, that was the big one at that point in time. There was also a couple other really great websites out there called, there's one that's still around today called toughpigs.com. They're a very, very good Muppet blog. And there was also a site called the Muppet Newsflash, which is no longer around. But those two sites were also very supportive. And they mentioned me once or twice on their own websites. And they had been around for several years also. So having this established fan community that I already had a foot inside of, that was big. And that's something that I learned too, is that you can create whatever you want to create in life, but if you aren't able to share it with other people, kind of what's the point? You know, we're not solitary creatures. We don't live and work in a vacuum. We want to share the things that we're proud of and that we love in life with each other. And so the Muppet Cast was no different. I was lucky, like I said, to have sort of a platform already, but the Muppet fan community is still today a very, very small part of, as I see it, the bigger Disney fan community. And so I kind of saw it as my task with the Muppet Cast to sort of introduce the Muppets to this greater Disney fan community, some of whom probably also liked the Muppets, but weren't like a hardcore Muppet fan, maybe like I was, or like the folks over at Muppet Central, but they liked the Muppets. And I figured, if I could create something to bring my experience of the Muppets to other people who maybe didn't already have that, but would appreciate it, well, I think that's what I got to do. And so like I said, I was a big fan of other Disney podcasts and hence other Disney podcasters. So I started just emailing people, reaching out to those other podcast hosts and saying, hey, I'm Steve Swanson. I have a brand new show. It's called the Muppet Cast. I'm a huge fan. I've already gotten some great feedback from other people. It seems like I'm going to have even some special guests on the show. There's Muppet news and trivia and all kinds of fun stuff that I'm doing. Take a listen to it. If you like it, I would love it if you mentioned the show on your podcast. And of course, I'll do the same for you. So I taught myself how to, and I'm an introvert. I'm a real introvert. So reaching out like that was kind of a big step, but I learned how to do it. And now it's very comfortable to even email people like, there's a movie out called I Am Big Bird that I reached out to the filmmakers of that and to the company that made that movie and was able to get interviews with those guys and reach out to Sesame Workshop and get some of the characters and some of the human actors and the puppeteers and all that on the show. But it came from those initial steps of building a platform, building an audience, kind of like you can kind of fit them all in a little hula hoop, and then a slightly bigger hula hoop, and then a slightly bigger one. And for me, it's always been like that. It's been, I don't need to be a big sensation overnight. In fact, that'll never happen. I want to grow this show one listener at a time. If I can, and I'm big on personal connections. If someone reaches out on Facebook, I want to have a conversation with that person. If someone emails me, I want to get to know them as a person, not just as someone who listens to the show. And it's great that they listen to the show, but I almost always look at those opportunities as, wow, here's an opportunity to make a new friend and to get to know someone, because then they can become part of the family. And then, this whole thing gets bigger. So that's really how I've done it over 8 years now.
It's interesting how things have to steamroll over time, and being able to bring on big names in the community is pretty amazing. I think though that the funniest thing about the Muppets is no matter how long it's existed, no matter how many episodes, Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, and all the Muppet movies and all that stuff, it's still like a subset of its own thing. It's like a subset of a subset in and of itself. It's funny how something like one character like Mickey Mouse could have that huge effect where it's like, hey, we have multiple theme parks where the main character is this one person, and it's like, hey, the Muppets. You get this little like cutout of two theme parks now, or I guess it's in Disneyland Paris too with the Muppets 3D.
Muppets 3D? I don't think Muppets 3D is in Paris.
No, for some reason I felt like it was, but you're probably right.
But yeah, I think the lone Muppet Vision 3D is in Florida now. We had one in California, but that just closed.
And hopefully it'll stay there.
Oh, fingers crossed. Yes.
I'm going to be very upset if it goes away.
I think a lot of people would. Yeah.
But with all that said, what's been the biggest roadblock for you with the Muppet Cast?
The biggest roadblock has been the occasional creative drought that hits. And, we all get writer's block from time to time. And there are times when I'm super passionate about the show and I've got a bunch of ideas. And every time I sit down I normally do this on Sundays. And so every time I sit down on Sunday It's I've got plenty of ideas, and I write an outline, and I've got my emails, and I've got some trivia questions that I think up, and I do a little bit of research, and I've got some Muppet history I can talk about, and I've usually have an interview already recorded, or I've got something I can talk about more in depth for a feature segment where we kind of dive deeper into something in the Muppets. And it's all going to come together, and it's all great. And at the end of the night, I've got a great new episode, and I'm really psyched about it. And there are other times that I sit down in the front of the microphone and just don't have a show in me, and that creative energy is not there. And so, yeah, that's the hardest part, is keeping the batteries charged. And it's hard. Sometimes it's what the thing that I've really found is striking a balance. Instead of looking for everything being riding the highs all the time, with the highs come the lows. So more than anything now, I'm just looking to keep that pendulum right there in the middle, and to kind of keep just a nice creative energy flow going with it, with these ideas. And there are things that I do throughout the week to kind of keep the saw sharpened. One of the things that I do is I write out a lot of ideas. I used to do just writing a list of 10 ideas a day. And I'm not great at doing it every day, but I try to do it every day, because that keeps it keeps the creative muscles flexed. And I recommend it for a lot of people. It's not my own idea to do this. There's another guy named James Altucher who came up with with this idea. Maybe he stole it from someone too. I don't know, but it's really good. Just pick any topic, any subject at all, and try to write down 10 ideas. Here are 10 ways that I could exercise right now, and come up with a list. It doesn't have to be exhaustive. Here are 10 businesses, if I had $1 million, that I could start this week. And the first few episodes, I said episodes, the first few ideas come pretty easily. And by number 7, your brain is starting to sweat a little bit, and you're starting to feel that mental exertion, that creative exertion that's necessary to stay consistently creative and to have ideas. Because what you're doing is you're teaching yourself how to have ideas. Now, I do that pretty often. I've also kind of gotten into this thing of mind mapping, which is really, really, it's a lot more conducive to the way that I think, because I usually get an idea and then just start branching out and thinking deeper into that idea. And then I come back up to the surface and start down another route under that same topic. So mind mapping has been a great thing, and it's actually helped me come up with a lot of interesting ideas for the Muppet Cast recently. So and some other things in life as well. But it's staying creative that I think is the biggest challenge, especially after 8 years. So it's doing those kind of mental exercises that I do, not for the objective of riding high up on the wave and high up on the mountain, but just keeping a nice, steady, creative flow. And that seems to be working well so far. I've got probably a good year's worth of ideas for shows right now in me to be able to do and to keep going. And then after that, we'll just see.
Yeah, sometimes it can be really tough to keep up with the ideas. I know for this show, I've wanted to do episodes with different guests and just purely focus on a topic for like 10 to 20 minutes. And sometimes it gets really tough because you're trying to not just rebrand the same thing over and over and over again.
Absolutely, yeah.
And trying to find different topics to talk about. It can be very difficult. I mean, especially in something, if you're not doing it all the time. I mean, it's one of those things where if I really wanted to focus in and get tons and tons of ideas, it's where I'm just going to do what you said, where you write down 10 ideas every single day, and some of them if you get 2 good ones or 3 good ones, it's like baseball. If you get 3 hits out of 10, then you're a legend.
Oh, if you get 2 good ones in a month, you're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's tough, especially since you're doing it all alone. You don't have a whole team of people each coming up with 10 things to maybe eke out 1 or 2 a day that are viable, that you could expand upon and make into something. But then to be able to continuously hit them over and over and over and over and over again, where you're not bumping into or basically just rebranding the same topic over and over again. It's tough. It's really, really tough. So I give you a lot of credit for being able to stick with just, just in your lane of Muppets and bringing Disney into with the Muppets.
Well, thank you. I think that's been one of the strong suits of the show, and Lord knows a lot of listeners have also pitched in with a lot of really great creative ideas. Being able to find new ways and different angles to look at, not only the past, but there's things that are happening in the present time with Muppets and things that are happening in the future. And luckily, for most of the time that the Muppet Cast has been around, there has been a past, present, and future things coming up.
So, Steve, when you were growing up, what was your childhood dream?
My childhood dream was to be a rock star. I was actually, and I was just talking about this on the show recently, a little bit, not to this degree, but so I've always been a music kid. I taught myself how to play piano when I was about fifth grade or so, something like that, around 10 years old. And I didn't own a piano. My dad was a big record collector, so music had always been in the house. And somehow music had always resonated with me. I didn't know this at the time, but my music teacher from school, from even earlier elementary school, had kind of pulled my parents aside and said, he actually has a lot of natural ability to retain melodies. I think he's got perfect pitch. And I think if you kind of help nurture that, that could really come along in his early childhood. And it did. My parents were not musicians themselves. Like I said, my dad was a record collector, so he listened to a lot of oldies, 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s rock and roll, and country as well. I grew up on a steady diet of both, and I still have a big appreciation for records and vinyl in particular. I think that's a great medium of music that, well, we kind of lost, and I think it's coming back a little bit, so that's nice too. But my first musical memory, the first song, Joe, that I ever remember hearing is I Get Around by the Beach Boys. And I could even picture the record that it was on. It was like a Beach Boys Greatest Hits album that my dad was playing one afternoon. I think I was like 3 years old or something. But yeah, we didn't own a piano when I started tinkering around on the piano. There was a piano at my church. So that tells you how many days a week I had access to a piano to play. And kind of started figuring out, oh, these keys sound good when I play them together and these don't. Okay. So I had no idea what notes I was playing. I had no idea what a chord was. I just knew that some notes sounded good in combinations, and started getting some systems of figuring out where to put my fingers at the right time to just to tinker around. I wasn't even really playing songs. I was just playing notes. And very shortly after that, my parents got me a keyboard of my own. It wasn't a full size, just a little Casio keyboard kind of thing. And that's when I started being able to write songs and actually put my own words to my own chords. I still didn't really know what they were, but I knew I had a really good sense within a year or two of what chords were where. And then eventually I did, maybe came across an old piano book or something and said, oh, this is middle C. Oh, that's what that is. All right. And I figured out, oh, this is a C chord. This is a D chord. I still wasn't playing them the right way. I can't show you. Well, I can show you. I was playing chords like this with my middle three fingers instead of the thumb, middle, and pinky, the way you ought to. It was silly, but I always had big hands, so it worked. But I kept up with that. I kept up with playing and singing and writing. I got into a classical extracurricular choir that sang almost strictly classical music. So I got into classical choral music as well as sixth grader, which I don't think many sixth grade kids really get into that and really enjoy it, but I did. Started playing guitar when like I said a little bit earlier today, when I was in high school. Started teaching myself how to play that. The first song I ever played on guitar was Guns N' Roses' Patience, because it was in G and it was easy to play. And Todd Snyder came shortly thereafter. And let's see, started playing drums about 5 or 6 years ago. So I play a lot of different things, and I just kind of pick them up. But it was all I always kind of had this creativity, this kind of spark that always came from music, and I really think I really credit the Muppets and Sesame Street in particular, and then the Muppet Show, and then Fraggle Rock as well. Growing up, I really credit those musical styles of implanting these neural pathways that told me how music is supposed to fit together, and it wasn't until, later on in my teenage years where I started connecting, a lot of my life is in music now, and that really started to take hold in my teenage years. But, that's always kind of a struggle as well, being a music kid, because I wasn't an athlete at all, Joe. I was really awful. I'm 6'4" and can't play basketball. Let me tell you how my high school years went. But it worked out. It worked out. The rest of my family is very athletic, and I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, we're all tall in my family. I'm 6'4". My younger brother's 6'5", and then I have younger twin brothers, but they're fraternal. One is 6'5", the other is 6'2", 6'3". We're just a bunch of trees in my family. But I did find out something very recently that was interesting to me. I didn't know my paternal grandmother. She died when I was very, very young, around 2 or 3 years old. I have very vague memories of seeing her, but never really interacting or getting to know who she was as a person. But what I found out was she was an artist. She painted, and she was a writer. She wrote plays. Oh, this is interesting. This is maybe where I get some of this. And on my mother's side, my grandfather on my mother's side is not a musician, but he's an artist as well. Although his creativity comes through shell craft. They went to Florida every year, and he came home with like suitcases full of seashells, and his basement was full of these shells, and he would just build things. He would hot glue these shells together to make little frogs and dogs and creatures and characters of his own creation that weren't an animal. He just made them up. And I didn't realize this until recently, like, oh my God, that's where a lot of my creativity comes from also, and he would just drive past, yard sales and see like big wooden yard ornaments and things. And he would just come back home, draw them out, and cut them out of wood and make them. Oh my gosh. He built by sight the way that I play music by ear. And like these are very recent revelations, and like it's kind of cool. I'm in my late 30s right now, and I'm still, life is still showing me some amazing surprises and some new things. And I think I'm at a point where I'm starting to see how things are all kind of connecting. The music, the podcast, the teaching. I'm a teacher by nature as well. Like things are all kind of coming together. And it's really been an amazing last year, 2 years.
Oh, it's interesting how how you find out things so many years later, especially when you believe that you're the only one of your kind in your family. Yeah. And lo and behold, you're not, and it's awesome. I guess it gives you a little bit of a sense of belonging at that point.
It does. It really does. Yes.
So, well, with that said, I know that before the show, you had said that you teach kids or students how to sing and play music. And I was just curious as how that factors in with what your dreams for the future look like.
That's a good question. So, yeah, teaching is, my first degree was music ed. So when I got into college, I wanted to get a music degree, although I didn't know at the time that you couldn't major in being a rock star. That particular revelation came after I had paid my tuition. But I found out you can major in one of two things at the school that I was at least. It is a wide world out there, but in the school that I was at, you could major in vocal performance, meaning opera, or music education. Well, I learned very quickly that I wasn't going to be an opera singer. So music education it was for me, and that wasn't a bad thing because my mom is a teacher. She's been a teacher. Well, she taught here in Ohio for 35 years and then retired. and then she and Dad moved out to Arizona, and Mom got bored and went back to teaching again. So it's a very natural thing in my family. My younger brother is also a teacher. And I was for a little while too. I was a public school teacher, teaching choral music and drama. And that was fun, but as many young teachers out there who may be listening could testify, it is not a profession for the young anymore. It's very difficult to be a new teacher in our system. And I kind of realized very early on that, I'm not going to do this forever. So I got out of that and got into IT instead. But the teaching bug, I definitely have been bitten by the teaching bug. And so I still, for a long time here in Columbus, I taught at a recording studio. I taught voice mostly. And I had like over 30 kids a week, and it was great. And I got to meet a lot of great kids, and it was, in many ways, it was all the best parts of teaching without all the administrative hassles and all the bureaucracy that I didn't like in public school teaching. But even then, you work a full day, and then you go teach for 3-4 more hours on top of that, and you do that 6 days a week, and that's tough. That's not sustainable, as I found. So I stepped away from the studio, and now I teach, depending on the time of year, between 3 and 6 students. And since I'm just teaching on my own and I don't have to give a cut back to a studio, I make about the same as when I had those 30 students. But you know what? It wasn't a mistake to be teaching all those kids at once, because you look back and you go, oh, that I was meant to do that at that time in life for that reason. And I really do think that. So now I still teach kids mostly vocal performance, but I teach a few like how to play guitar and piano as well. But I warn them that I'm going to teach you how I learned, which was my way. And it's going to work, but we'll take a few steps back and also look at how to read music as well. But I'm going to teach you primarily how to do the whole playing by ear thing. And then I'm going to shove you up in front of an audience really quick. So just be ready. and they all do great with it. We go out and we all sing together sometimes. We have a great time. And with teaching now, that's continuing for now. But with podcasting, it's kind of, I'm seeing how teaching is now kind of making its way back into another part of life, into the podcasting area. So as you listen to this, you will be able to, I'm also doing podcasting consulting, which is kind of like teaching. I'm teaching people how to record, how to edit, or teaching them that I'll do that part for you. If you just want to do the recording part, I'll do all the production for you. And maybe seeing if that becomes like a lucrative business. I think it could be. And of course, doing some of the voice acting stuff as well. I've done some narration and some voiceover work. But the teaching part of it with the podcasting is coming in too now. So now there's my website out there is Flipper Media, which you can go to online at flipper.media.
Well, awesome. That's awesome that you're going to be able to do that and work with people over the internet to make a difference in their lives as well.
I think the main thing is, and you know this from everything that you do too, Joe. It's the value that you can help people create, right? That's what it's really all about. And we all want to make money, and that's great. I also watched Bob Ross a lot as a kid. The Happy Painter. We all want to make a happy buck, but you make something valuable for yourself by adding value to other people. And sometimes that's been more apparent to me than others in life, but it's really, that point has really come home, especially in the last year or so. And so that's been something that I've wanted to do. I kind of dipped my toe into that consulting thing a while back, and it just wasn't the right time. But things seem like a lot more life has been lived, a lot more time has passed, and I think looking at it like that, as this is something that I can help people even more than I can with the Muppet Cast. I think the Muppet Cast is nice and it creates value and people love listening to it, but this is also something on a different level that can really add that kind of value.
Well, definitely, and I'll definitely share that in the show notes at howtodream.co. Before we share the rest of your websites and how people can get a hold of you online, is there any other last thoughts you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, I think I know there's a lot of really great inspirational stuff that you've already imparted to listeners in other shows, and I can first of all, I can just give a resounding second to all of that. Keep dreaming, keep moving forward. There's a great Muppet song that I use it for inspiration a lot. If just one person believes in you, deep enough and strong enough believes in you, well, then eventually a second person, two whole people believe in you. And if two whole people, why not three or four or many, many more? And that it just kind of builds, and it's kind of been my philosophy with how I've, grown the Muppet Cast and grown many things in my life, is by taking the time, stepping away from what I think is my comfort zone in my little introvert box. Because once I take a step out of that box, I realize, you know what, I wanted to do that. That was amazing. I've never come away from an experience where I've gotten out of my comfort zone and said, oh, that was awful. I wish I hadn't done that. I'm always glad in some dimension or form or fashion for the experience that came from it. Introvert's really not the word. I'm just a shy guy. Like, I can sit here in front of a microphone and do a lot of this stuff, but I'll tell you what, it's when I face those moments and take those steps in life that are kind of scary sometimes. That's when I find that I'm not only growing for myself, but where my life grows, where I grow my life and my network and my friends, where my friends, the number of people in my life that I call friends, and the people who I actually have already been friends with. I had some great moments with some friends recently down in Florida where we found ourselves in some spots that were a little uncomfortable. One of them being stranded on the side of World Drive in the middle of Walt Disney World. And you know what? It was great. We could have freaked out and we could have looked at everything bad in the situation, but we found the fun in the moment that was there. And really that's it. Their life is going to be great. It's going to be not so great, but there's always something that can be good, that can be found in it.
Yeah, you just have to find the right perspective.
Really do
to make it happen. It's almost
Stay
like
out of traffic.
Well, I'm glad you made it out all right.
We are too. Yes.
Steve, I would love for you to share how people can connect with you.
Absolutely. Well, the main website for the Muppet Cast is muppetcast.com. My email address is me@muppetcast.com. And okay, so Joe, I say it like that on the show every week. I can't tell you how often when I meet people in person or on Skype or even in the parks, what's the one thing they ask me to do? They ask me to say my email address because they've gotten so used to it. Will you say your email address? What? Oh, yeah, it's me@muppetcast.com. Oh, he said it. Oh my gosh. And it's so funny. So yes, that is the email address. I'm on Twitter.
What was that email address again?
It's me@muppetcast.com.
Woo!
And I'm on Skype and Instagram. Those are both @MuppetCast. The Facebook page is muppetcast.com/Facebook. The iTunes subscription page is muppetcast.com/iTunes. I do a show called The Backstage Podcast, which is a lot more in-depth into my own life and some of my podcaster friends. That's backstagepod.com. And again, it's my podcast consulting. If you're interested, I can help you get up and running. It's flipper.media. There's no .com. It's just flipper.media.
I know some people are going to have trouble in the near future when more sites have no .com, no anything other than.
It's crazy what's out there. Yeah, it's amazing what's out there. The minute that the .music extension is available, Steve Swanson .music is mine. But it's not out there yet. But .media is there. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, spend a small fortune every year on domain names.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
But, well, Steve, I will have all those links at howtodream.co in the show notes for people to find and hopefully connect with you.
Hey, thanks so much, man. This has been so much fun.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I'm glad that we were able to connect. Thank you, Beatrice, for making that happen. It's
Yes.
greatly appreciated. In fact, she spent pretty much the whole time on the 2-hour live, 2.5-hour live show with
Oh
us.
yeah,
a
she
couple
says hi,
months
by the way. Yes.
uh, so yeah, I would love to have you on again in like a year or so and see how you've been.
I'd love that. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Awesome. Hopefully, Flipper dot media will be going very swimmingly.
There you go. Nice.
Pun intended.
Yes. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dreamers Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Dreamers Podcast. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Dreamers Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the Dreamers Podcast, please send an email to j@jpar.co. This podcast is copyright 2014 by jpar.co.